shall pay, Black Prince. I curse you with my name. You shall be Blacula.
Blacula, the Black Avenger, rising from his tomb to fill the night with horror. Blacula, Dracula's soul brother, deadlier even than he. Blacula, he thirsts for your blood, he hungers for your soul, more horrifying than Dracula. The Black Avenger, Blacula, an American international release.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I'm gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me.
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that worked!
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first.
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Greetings and welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And this week we're talking about Blacula from 1972.
Blacula was directed by William Crain, from a screenplay by Joan Torres, Raymond Koenig, and Richard Glouner. It was produced by Power Productions and Samuel Z. Arkoff and Joseph T. Naar.
Blacula stars William Marshall as Prince Mamuwalde / Blacula, Denise Nicholas as Michelle Williams, Vonetta McGee as Tina Williams / Luva, Gordon Pinsent as Lieutenant Jack Peters, Thalmus Rasulala as Dr. Gordon Thomas, Emily Yancy as Nancy, the nightclub photographer, Lance Taylor Sr. as Swenson, the funeral director, Logan Field as Sergeant Barnes.
Also appearing are Ted Harris as Bobby McCoy, Rick Metzler as Billy Schaffer, Ketty Lester as Juanita Jones, the Cabbie, Charles Macaulay as Count Dracula, Jitu Kumbuka as Skillet, Elisha Cook Jr. as Sam, the morgue attendant, Eric Brotherson as the real estate agent, and the Hughes Corporation as themselves.
We open not in 1972, but in the past, Transylvania 1780 at Castle Dracula. Count Dracula is entertaining some guests. His visitors are royalty from the so-called Dark Continent. His words, not mine. It's Prince Mamuwalde and his wife Luva.
Castle Dracula seems to be a very spacious place because their voices are very echoey.
Yeah, the sound people didn't do their job here.
Anyway, Count Dracula is showing Mamuwalde and Luva around, and they all sit at a table, presumably for a dinner.
Everything is all very polite, cordial, until Prince Mamuwalde reveals his reason for being there. His people sent him there to get the rulers of Europe to agree to cease all slave trade. Dracula scoffs at this. Mamuwalde asks, isn't slavery barbaric? And Count Dracula says, barbaric from the point of the slave, maybe.
And then he goes on to say that he would pay dearly for one as exquisite as his delicious wife. And he says that, of course, he means that as a compliment.
Yeah, it's a compliment of a man of his station to be attracted to someone of, again, his words, their color.
Mamuwalde is rightfully offended at this, and he accuses Dracula of behaving like some sort of animal. And then Dracula reminds him that only one of them comes from the jungle.
It's so awful, even for 1780. Mamuwalde gets up to leave. He asks the Count to summon his coachman. Dracula says, I do not think so. He calls in two henchmen, or as Jeff wants to call them, Renfields, who fight with Mamuwalde. Dracula holds back Luva as the two men overpower Mamuwalde.
Yeah, they do this while one is holding him down, the other tosses a vase over his head, and the wind from it seems to knock Mamuwalde out.
It's a very badly choreographed fight scene. Nonetheless, Luva's in Dracula's power, Mamuwalde is out, and all of a sudden, we see the Count surrounded by a horde of female vampires. Two of them grab Luva, and Dracula bears Mamuwalde's neck so that he can be bitten.
Then Mamuwalde and Luva are taken to a crypt, and as Luva watches, Mamuwalde is placed into a coffin.
Dracula sentenced him to lie there and suffer, both from having to listen to the death throes of his wife, who is going to starve to death, and to feel the ceaseless gnawing hunger that he can never sate.
So Dracula, with fangs bared and crying tears of blood, curses Mamuwalde with his name and christens him Blacula.
A vampire like himself, a living fiend, never to know that sweet blood that will be his only desire. And Luva will watch, helpless and dying, till the black flesh falls off her body. Let his cries comfort you, he says, and then everyone leaves, closes the crypt.
The door is locked. Luva tries to open the casket, but she cannot. And we cut to the opening credits.
These credits are so cute. It's an animated sequence with a little bat chasing a...
clot of blood.
Oh, yeah, clot of blood.
That sometimes morphs into the shape of a woman.
And then the little bat does unspeakable things to the woman-shaped blood clot, and then it flies off. And this repeats several times.
And back to the film, we find ourselves in the present day, 1972.
Still in Transylvania, though.
Still at Castle Dracula.
There are two antique hunters there, Billy Schaffer and Bobby McCoy, and they are surveying the contents of Castle Dracula. They're also, just to let you know, played as very flamboyantly gay. This will be problematic later in the movie.
They laugh at the mention of Dracula's name.
But they also see dollar signs because they feel like this is going to make this stuff fly off the shelves.
And it's kind of funny that they react this way because they're visiting Castle Dracula and they act as if they're hearing the name for the first time inside the castle.
Maybe it has another name for the tourists. I don't know.
Well, you think that Castle Dracula would be the name they want to use for the tourists.
In this movie, Dracula is a myth, a legend, a story, but we also have to accept that it's a real myth, a real legend, a real story at some point. They want to see some of the castle's secret passages.
Yeah, the real estate agent tells them that they did find several secret rooms in the castle, and he takes them to one, and we recognize it as the crypt where Mamuwalde was laid not to rest, and Luva was left to starve.
Apparently it smells very bad in there, as you might imagine. Billy and Bobby see the coffin and ask that the realtor add that to the deal that they've made.
I find it interesting that obviously they found the secret room earlier, and they've cleaned up Luva's skeletal remains, because I'm sure they were there.
Yeah, bones, baby.
And there was a coffin there that they just left.
Yeah, no curiosity as to what's inside it?
Yeah, it seems a little odd to me. A little convenient, but there's a lot of conveniences in this movie.
We just have to work our way through the plot holes and keep going. All the castle's contents are shipped to the port of Los Angeles and moved into a warehouse.
Bobby and Billy are anxious to start tagging their items, and Billy wants to open the coffin, but Bobby's a little more reluctant to see what's inside.
Billy's idea for the coffin is to replace the chintzy bed in the guest bedroom with a coffin. He thinks people will be very shocked and surprised to see that. Bobby's working on unlocking the casket, which is padlocked. At the same time, Billy is opening a crate with a crowbar. In the process of doing that, he cuts himself rather badly.
Having already broken the padlock, but not having had time to open the coffin, Bobby rushes to Billy's aid. And as Billy whines, Bobby grabs some gauze and starts wrapping the wound.
They're not paying attention to the coffin, because if they were, they would see the lid starting to open. Nor do they see Blacula, Prince Mamuwalde in vampire form, rising from the coffin. So he has the element of surprise, and he's fanged and ready.
Bobby is the first to notice him. He just stares in disbelief, and Billy looks over to see what he's looking at, and he too stares in disbelief.
Blacula is attracted to Billy's very bloody wound and attacks him first, drinking from the wound in his arm. Bobby attempts to save his friend and probably lover by hitting him over the back with a large chunk of wood. It does nothing. Blacula looks at him surprised and then attacks Bobby as well. He easily overpowers him and bites him on the neck, killing him.
Then Mamuwalde finds a cape that's lying around, it must have been Dracula's, and decides that it would be a good look for him. He puts it on, and as he does this, we hear Dracula's words ring out, "I curse you with my name, you shall be Blacula." And then Mamuwalde laughs and sits back in his coffin and lays down.
That cape was in really good shape for an almost 200-year-old antique.
Next, we see Mamuwalde visiting a funeral home.
It's Bobby's funeral. He's lying in a coffin. What we see, and no one else does, is Bobby's hand moving to the edge of the coffin.
Just to clarify, Mamuwalde is kind of hiding in the shadows and hanging back. He's not visiting Bobby McCoy.
But Bobby does have visitors. It's friends of the family. They are the Williams sisters. We see a woman. Her name's Michelle, her husband, Gordon, and the other sister is wearing a cloak with a hood over her face, so we can't see her yet. And there's a reason for that.
Her name is Tina, And the three of them have come to pay their respects to Bobby McCoy.
She does eventually remove that hood, though. And we see, as does Prince Mamuwalde, that she is the spitting image, the very likeness of Luva, his dead wife. Michelle and Tina are going to go visit Bobby's family, so they leave, but Gordon Thalmus, who's a doctor, wants to stay behind and look at the body.
He's heard about the patch job they did on Bobby, and he wants to check out the handiwork.
Talking to the funeral director, he reveals he's with the Scientific Investigation Division of what we presume is the LAPD. The funeral director says he did what he could with that bite mark. He's never seen a rat bite like that. It was 2-3 inches deep.
And a big chunk of the flesh was gone.
Gordon notes that his veins are collapsing. It looks like he's been drained of blood.
The funeral director also mentions that there was no embalming.
At the family's request. Gordon wants to know about Bobby's associate, and the funeral director, Mr. Swenson, says that he's in another funeral home, one for white people. Gordon leaves abruptly, leaving the fawning funeral director to comment on his rudeness.
Outside, the Williams girls split up. Tina says she's tired and she wants to head home. Well, Michelle will go to try to comfort Mrs. McCoy. Tina is walking home alone. She hears some noise behind her. She suspects she's being followed and she picks up her pace. She starts to run, and rounding a corner, she runs straight into Mamuwalde. He calls her Luva and he grabs her arms. And he doesn't seem to understand why she responds negatively to this name, when it's really the fact that this strange man has just accosted her. In the street, at night. Tina gets away. She runs. In the course of running away, she drops her purse. She looks back and decides it's not worth it to go back and pick it up. Mamuwalde yells after her, but he doesn't give chase right away. Mamuwalde does head in that direction, and he does come across her purse, and he picks that up. And as soon after that, run over by a cab. He ran into the street, right into the path of a cab. After Mamuwalde rolls off her hood, the cab stops. The driver gets out. She wants to make sure that he's okay. She wants to make sure he's okay, but she's also very angry that he ran in front of her cab. Yeah, because once she sees that he is okay, then they start to have a little spat in the street. This is Juanita Jones. She's got a bit of an attitude. She does. Well, she probably is on her way to a fair, and he's making her late. Mamuwalde reveals that he's running after a woman, and this further angers Juanita, saying that he's going to get himself killed running after Tail. She thinks she has the better of him. She even calls him boy. And then she sees his fangs come out, and she knows she's really in danger. She immediately tries to smooth things over by saying that this woman has to be around here somewhere, and she's probably looking for him. But Mamuwalde grabs her by the face and bites her. Now we're back with Tina. She's running to her apartment, but she doesn't have her keys. Fortunately for her, there's a spare key. Somewhere in the hallway, it looks like it's in a fuse box. The little cabinet where the fuses are. I don't know what those are called. She grabs her key and lets herself into her apartment and chains the door. Almost immediately, there is a knock on the door. Tina grabs a knife. Before answering it, it's her sister Michelle at the door. What a relief. Tina lets her in and tells her she's just been attacked by a man. The man has her purse, keys, and ID, she believes. She was afraid it was him at the door, and Michelle tries to comfort her. Meanwhile, Mamuwalde has returned to his warehouse, and he fondles the purse that he has found before returning to his coffin. The next day at the police station, Gordon goes up to the morgue to talk to Sam, the morgue attendant. The coroner sent him there to see Juanita Jones. Gordon dons a white lab coat, and Sam wheels out the body on a gurney. Gordon notices there are 2 pinhole marks on her neck. A thought goes through his head, but he laughs it off, saying that's ridiculous. Meanwhile, Sam is making unpleasant assumptions about a female cabbie, very misogynistic, but Gordon doesn't pay any attention to that. Now we see Gordon speaking with Lieutenant Jack Peters about a missing report on Bobby McCoy and Billy Schaffer. No one can find the incident report, but Peters doesn't believe that it's lost. He sends one of the female cops, Maureen, to go get it. Gordon wants to know who checked in the body and assumes it was one of the more incompetent doctors on staff. And he wonders why this shoddy work only seems to occur when there's a black victim. Maureen returns and says she wasn't able to find the reports and that they were lost before distribution. So Officer Barnes is sent to pick them up at the Southwest Station. Peters wants to know if he thinks Gordon is suspecting this is an organized crime hit, like from the Black Panthers. Gordon describes the victims, 2 gay interior decorators and a lady cab driver. He doesn't think so. No, it's not exactly their MO. He tells Peters to instruct Barnes to bring the reports to the club once he finally finds them. They're going to be there tonight because it's Michelle's birthday. Michelle apparently also works at the station in a lab, and Gordon uses the phone in the lab to call the funeral home and asks to pick up Bobby McCoy's body for an autopsy.
Michelle tells Gordon how Tina got hassled on the way home and that she's having her locks changed because she thinks the assailant got her purse. Gordon promises that next year they're going to move to the suburbs. Like we did last year, snarks Michelle.
He winks and leaves, and Michelle returns to her microscope.
And then we cut to something really fun. The Hughes Corporation is performing in the club, and it's glorious.
They're performing a song called There He Is Again, and it's somewhat prophetic for the entire movie.
Yeah, if you watch it, turn on the captions so you can read the lyrics. It's really cool. And it's a good song, too.
Tina and Michelle and Gordon are enjoying the show when Mamuwalde enters the club and talks to the maitre d'. Do clubs have maitre d's?
Looks like they do.
This one does. So we can't hear what's going on because the Hughes Corporation is loud. But we see them speaking, and then a waitress is summoned and sent over to fetch Tina. So she brings Tina over to Mamuwalde, and they have an exchange. Mamuwalde returns her purse, and again, we still can't hear anything because the Hughes Corporation is loud.
But she looks very happy, and then she invites him to come to their table and meet her friends. And he accepts. At the table, Tina introduces everyone to Mamuwalde and Mamuwalde to everyone. She says it's Michelle's birthday party. Mamuwalde sits down and orders some champagne, French.
Gordon says that's not necessary, but Michelle says, "What do you mean not necessary? I like champagne."
Yeah, let the lady have what she wants. It's her birthday.
And then Mamuwalde tells Tina that she bears a striking resemblance to his wife, whom he lost only a short while ago.
It was a rather long, short while ago. He apologizes if he inadvertently frightened Tina. Michelle asks him why he was at the funeral parlor. Mamuwalde lies and says he was making some arrangements of his own. Anyway, enough talk of death. The champagne has arrived.
It might be enough talk of death for them, but we're going to cut to Swenson's funeral home, where the cops have arrived to pick up Bobby McCoy's body for that autopsy. But when they open the casket, it's empty. We cut back to the club. The Hughes Corporation is now performing I'm Going to Catch You.
The funeral director, who also knows that Gordon is at the club tonight, calls him there. Gordon takes the call and is very surprised to hear that the coffin is empty. Gordon returns to the table and explains what happened. Mamuwalde is playing dumb and suggests that perhaps he's not dead. At this, Gordon's a little insulted because he examined the body himself. Just an observation, notes Mamuwalde.
And now we're introduced to a new character. Skillet has joined the party.
Yay!
Skillet helps himself to some champagne, and a waitress comes over and starts taking pictures.
She's the club photographer. This is Yancy. She starts snapping photos of everyone at the table, and Mamuwalde gets the flash in his eyes.
It seems to bother him, and he immediately excuses himself. As he leaves, Tina follows him.
Back at the table, Skillet says that's one weird dude.
And he comments on Mamuwalde's attire.
Especially the cape.
He likes the cape.
Who wouldn't?
Mamuwalde is telling Tina that he would like to see her again, and Tina says that she'll be here, and you know where to find me.
So they plan to meet the next day. While they're speaking, Yancy the photographer snaps a picture of the two of them. Mamuwalde looks annoyed at this because somehow, though he's been in a coffin for the past 190 years, he knows that photography exists and incompatible with vampirism. And then Mamuwalde leaves.
So Tina returns to the table, and Yancy the photographer tells the group that she'll take her film to her lab. She lives right next door, and she'll be right back with Michelle's birthday pictures.
Skillet tries to get her to invite him along, but she's immune to his charms, though she's kind of flirty with him. Her studio is a house next to the club. She goes inside and puts on a record and goes into her darkroom to get to work. She's also drinking some Coors.
We hear the sound of the front door creaking open, and she notices, but doesn't do anything about it. And she starts developing her pictures.
Mamuwalde has let himself into the house. So much for that bit of vampire lore about being unable to enter unless invited in. By this time, Yancy has developed the picture of Tina and Mamuwalde, except only Tina is showing up on the film. She wonders, where's that big dude with the cape?
She pulls back the curtains and goes to leave the darkroom, and she sees the sight of Mamuwalde gliding toward her.
And growling like an animal.
And he bites her.
While he's attacking her, he takes the print out of her hand.
Outside, Barnes, the policeman who was supposed to deliver that report to Gordon, pulls up at the club, and he sees Yancy stumbling out of her house right next door.
He asks, "Do you live here?" of Yancy. She doesn't really answer, but he picks her up and carries her back into the house anyways. And there she, I guess you could say, vamps out and bites him on the neck.
Now it's the next morning, and we're at the police station, and Gordon is talking to Peters about the report. And Peters says that Barnes was supposed to deliver it to the club last night, and Gordon says that he never got it. So Peters calls for Barnes, wanting to get to the bottom of things.
Then they talk about the body that disappeared from the funeral home. There were no fingerprints or signs of a break-in there. So they don't have any clues.
So Gordon says he wants permission to dig up Billy Schaffer for an autopsy.
Peters thinks this is too much. Do you know what I got to do to get permission for that? Peters wants to know what Gordon's angle is, and Gordon said, if I told you what I was thinking, you'd laugh at me.
He just goes as much to say that there's a connection, but that's all he's ready to share right now.
Peters reluctantly agrees to call about getting permission, and Gordon says, solid. However, back in Gordon's office, he gets a call from Peters where he says the autopsy is a no-go. And Gordon is understandably upset.
Michelle's there when Gordon takes this call, and as he hangs up,
he tells Michelle she better sit down. He's got something heavy to lay on her. So he lays it on her.
He tells Michelle of their activity for this evening. They're going to be digging up Billy's body. She thinks he's nuts.
She says ghouls, vampires, and now bodies. He's crazy.
But he tells her that she's supposed to stand by him.
He kind of sweetens her up with some kisses.
So she's going to go home and change into something more appropriate for grave digging, and he'll pick her up later.
He picks up a book on his desk, and we see by the title that it's called The Dead Ones.
Now, Mamuwalde has come to call on Tina. They were supposed to meet at the club, but he says he couldn't wait to see her and must talk to her.
Here, though, he asks to be invited in, and he is. He tells Tina how hard it was to leave her last night, and she confesses that she wanted to run after him, which has never happened to her before. She says he frightened her, but he tells her, don't be frightened. He'll help her understand.
She asks him if it's about his wife, and he replies, you are my wife. Tina says that's impossible, to which Mamuwalde replies, and yet you believe it.
Tina's not sure what she believes. She wants Mamuwalde to help her understand. And here he gives the backstory of Prince Mamuwalde and Luva. He says they are of the Abani tribe, from northeast of the Niger Delta. 200 years ago, his nation's elders sent him to Europe to protest the slave trade. On that mission, he was enslaved and his wife murdered, and he was placed under the curse of the undead by the Count Dracula. She thinks the Dracula story is a myth, but no, it's very real. Mamuwalde tells Tina that she is his wife, recreated. She wants to know, what are you asking of me?
Mamuwalde wants Tina to rejoin him, but she must come to him willingly, and at the moment she's too confused to be willing. He says that he will not take her by force, and he will not return. He goes to leave, but she asks him to stay.
It worked.
They kiss, and she unties his cape, and they embrace.
And you can fill in the blanks as to what happens next. Now we're grave digging with Gordon and Michelle.
Gordon is digging while Michelle is helpfully holding the flashlight.
And complaining. Gordon has dug all the way down to the coffin. He's a fast digger. He opens the casket, and a very green Billy rises sharply out of the casket and attacks him.
Gordon decks him with the shovel twice. As Michelle screams for him to stop, he's alive!
Eventually, Gordon manages to stake him through the heart, and Billy is active no more. Gordon tells Michelle that Billy wasn't alive or dead, that they just put him out of his misery.
Michelle realizes that this is the reason that Gordon has been reading all those weird books.
He must have known something. Why didn't he tell her? He didn't tell her because he knew that she wouldn't believe him, and they realize that means Bobby is also a vampire. Gordon thinks that Peters will also have to see it to believe it, and this is when he remembers Juanita Jones is cooling at the morgue.
So Gordon and Michelle race to a phone booth, and Gordon places a call to Sam, the morgue attendant, and tells him to take Juanita's body out of the freezer and to lock the room.
He's very insistent that Sam lock the room. Sam's doing the, yeah, get to it. And Gordon says, you can't just this. It's really important that you lock the door.
So Sam starts to do as he's told. He pulls out the body, and just then the phone rings. So he forgets about locking the door because he has more pressing matters, and he goes to answer the phone. As
Juanita starts to thaw, Gordon drops Michelle off with Lieutenant Peters' wife, Jill, just noting that they are Jack and Jill. And then Gordon takes Jack. They both head to the morgue,
where Juanita is now breathing.
Sam's doing some paperwork at his desk, and then the phone rings again, and he answers it.
Just then, Juanita comes out of the room, screeching down the hall towards Sam. She's changed her clothes.
She was wearing a sort of strapless gown of some kind that was orange, and now she's wearing, looks like a white hospital gown belted in the front. She runs screaming and snarling down the hallway and attacks Sam. This is a really good sequence. It's rather frightening.
And now we see that Mamuwalde has spent the night with Tina, but it's almost daylight and he must go.
She wants him to stay, but he can't be out in the daylight. She's afraid of joining him, and by joining him, I believe we mean joining the undead. Mamuwalde tells her that it's not unpleasant to become a vampire. And not in so many words, though.
And as he leaves, she says she loves him.
Wow, that was fast.
So Gordon and Peters have finally arrived at the morgue.
Sam's not there, but all his blood is.
Gordon has a large crucifix on his person that he's holding out as protection, and he goes to look in the freezer while Peters looks under a sheet. Under that sheet is Juanita. She gets up, screeching, and Gordon manages to corner her with his crucifix.
She's right by a window. Gordon opens the blinds and lets the daylight in, and that kills her.
Gordon then explains to Peters that this is what he wasn't able to tell him before, and that he knew that Peters would have to see this for himself to believe.
Yeah, and Sam had to die for it, but whatever. Over in Peters' office, Gordon's explaining how this works. The vampires multiply geometrically, or exponentially. First there's 1, then there's 2, then there's 4, then there's 16. Peters wants to know what they can do about it.
Gordon suggests they put out APBs on Bobby McCoy and Sam the morgue attendant. Peters doesn't think that's quite a good idea because APBs on 2 dead men might not fly too well.
He imagines this is going to end his career, if nothing else.
But he does say it's a good idea to have some extra patrols on the street, so he arranges that.
They're going to swamp the city, cop cars on every corner, but they don't have to do that till dark.
Peters tells Gordon to get some sleep, but then Gordon picks up a notepad with a sketch of a vampire on it and says there's something that he wants to check out.
And the next place we visit is the club again.
Yep, vampires exist, but there's still time for clubbing.
And more music by the Hughes Corporation.
Performing What the World Knows.
This is really great. I absolutely love this. Gordon, Michelle, and Tina are at the club again, and Mamuwalde shows up to sit with them, and he orders a Bloody Mary. Haha.
Gordon immediately starts asking about Mamuwalde's opinions of the cult and vampires.
Mamuwalde admits he has some fascination with the concept. They talk about heavier stuff like devil worship, witches, voodoo, and Mamuwalde says they can't discard the dark arts. Michelle asks him about vampires, and Mamuwalde calls them the most fascinating of all. Gordon says that the cops have a theory about the killings, and Mamuwalde laughs and asks, are we to believe a vampire or some other creature is behind them?
During this whole conversation, Tina looks really uncomfortable because Mamuwalde has already confessed to her what he is, and she is uneasy with the cat and mouse game going on here.
And also the talk of killing. Gordon admits that, yes, they are looking for a vampire, and tonight there's going to be an organized search for his resting place, or his coffin. Mamuwalde wonders if perhaps the modern vampire doesn't need a coffin.
And now Skillet makes another appearance, so that's Mamuwalde's cue to exit.
Tina wants to go with Mamuwalde, even though Michelle asks her to stay.
Before he leaves, Skillet offers to buy Mamuwalde's cape, but he laughs that off and leaves with Tina following.
Skillet notes that he's running off again just like he did the other night when Nancy was there. And oh, by the way, has anyone seen Nancy lately?
And Michelle says no when she realizes that she never got her birthday pics.
Skillet says, well, if you do see her, tell her I've got something groovy for her. Just imagine what that could be.
Now we cut away to Nancy's photo lab, and Gordon is in there doing a little investigation, I'm sure without a warrant.
And probably spurred on by Skillet's comment.
And he finds the negative of the picture that Nancy had taken of Mamuwalde and Tina, and realizes that Mamuwalde is not in the picture.
So now Gordon is sure that Mamuwalde is the vampire they're looking for. And he realizes he's with Tina.
Who would have suspected it was the guy walking around in a cape?
The last person you suspect.
So back at Tina's, she's asking Mamuwalde how he could be so blasé about Gordon's vampire talk. And this is when Gordon bursts in. Tina cries out, Mamuwalde, please don't hurt him. But Mamuwalde smacks him, and he takes off.
Outside, there's a cop car on the street.
Yeah, they see a black man running, and so they yell at him to stop.
Just a reflex, I'm sure. The 2 cops get out of their car and start chasing him on foot towards his warehouse.
Mamuwalde waits for them in an alley. And as the cop comes in, Mamuwalde pops out of hiding, fangs out, and cape spread.
The cop empties his chamber into the vampire, which does nothing, of course.
And Mamuwalde laughs at this and then slams the cop against the wall.
Yeah, he crushes his head and breaks him against the wall, but he doesn't bite him. Gordon and another uniformed cop run up to the scene, and they find the body in the alley.
Now back at Gordon's home, Gordon is telling Peters that he knows who the vampire is, and Peter asks where he might hang out, and Gordon just says in a coffin somewhere.
They don't think of the obvious place yet. They've got Tina there with them. She's supposed to be resting, but she can't sleep.
She asks what happened last night and says she heard shots. And Peters tells her that Mamuwalde killed a cop, and she's a little distraught at this news.
And Michelle goes to put her back to bed as Peters and Gordon plan what to do next. They need to get Mamuwalde before he returns to his coffin.
Out on the street, a couple of uniformed cops have spotted Bobby McCoy.
They're in a patrol car and they radio back to Gordon, who tells them to keep an eye on him, but to hang back, don't engage. And Peters and Gordon run off.
Before he goes, Gordon leaves his crucifix with Michelle.
And he asks her to keep Tina there no matter what.
So the cops who have been trailing Bobby have lost him in an alley.
A cop is driving Peters and Gordon around the city. Peters is on the radio telling HQ to get a grid on the area so they can figure out where he might be going. By now, the two cops have lost Bobby in the alley.
So as they're listening to this list of businesses in the area, one of them is a warehouse where this all started. So they figured, hey, that might be it.
Yeah, duh. Peters, Gordon, and the driver, Johnson, arrive at the warehouse, and there they spot Barnes. They wonder where he's been all this time and ask him to come inside with them.
So the four of them enter the warehouse, and the door slams shut behind them. And what's really notable is that there are a lot of oil lamps, and a couple of them are lit.
After they poke around for a little while, Johnson finds a body. It's just lying there on the ground.
As the others go to inspect this body, a vampiric Bobby McCoy suddenly leaps out at them.
Ha! He says.
And then looking around, there are many vampires, all green and blue and largely fanged.
They're all berobed and they have terrible hairdos, and they approach the cops en masse.
Johnson shoots at one several times. It has no effect, and then another vampire leaps on Johnson, and then there are suddenly many vampires on Johnson, and Johnson is no more of this world.
Peters wants to go help him, but Gordon says it's too late. They pick up some of the oil lamps and start hurling them at the vampires. And for some reason, even though we don't see any flame here, they all burst into flames when they hit.
And this is a point where Officer Barnes vamps out. Now, we know that he had gotten bit by Yancy days ago, but he seems surprised at this turn of events.
It looks like it's the first time, and that's not something that's been established in the movie, as Yancy turned into a vampire almost immediately, as did Bobby and Billy.
Barnes is coming toward Peters, and Peters is armed with an oil lamp, but he's hesitant to throw it at his friend. So Gordon leaps in and helps him out by throwing an oil lamp for him.
Another vampire attacks them, and Gordon sweeps him away with a broom, which breaks, and that makes a handy stake that he can kill the vampire with. This allows the two of them to escape, and they close the fire door behind them so we can presume that all the vampires inside will be dispatched.
When they get outside, they find Mamuwalde is there to meet them.
He's very formal and says, "Greetings, gentlemen."
He tells them that he's decided to move his coffin and that it was Gordon who gave him the idea.
Oh.
And Gordon asks if that's what he has planned for Tina, which angers Mamuwalde.
He says, "You know nothing of my plans for Tina. Her life means more to me than my own." And then he says, very politely, "Excuse me, I have another appointment." And he turns into a bat and flies away.
Now it's time for Tina's intervention. She has to realize that the man she loves is a literal monster and a killer of innocent people.
Yeah, there's a few red flags for that relationship.
But she doesn't know what she can do about it because she has no control over the way she feels.
She's in his thrall. Gordon wants her help to catch Mamuwalde, and she says she can't. And this makes Michelle very angry. She says that she or Gordon could be killed next. Is that what Tina wants? And Tina says no, but really sadly. Gordon demands her loyalty, and Tina reluctantly agrees.
Outside, the police are trying to seal off the street because they know that Mamuwalde is around there somewhere, but all of South Central has come out to see what's going on. The police keep telling people to go to their homes, there's nothing to see here, but the crowd keeps on with its milling.
There's nothing to convince me that there is something to see there than cops saying there's nothing to see here. With everyone walking around and protesting the cops being there, Mamuwalde has all the cover he needs to get close enough to Tina to psychically signal her to meet him somewhere. We see her in her room alone, acting as though she can hear him and responding. Now we see Mamuwalde on the roof.
He turns into a bat, and someone sees this bat and yells, a bat, a giant bat.
As she's screaming, Gordon, Michelle, and Peters hear that from the living room. They go in to look for Tina, but of course she's gone out the window because no one thought we should keep our eyes on her.
Peters makes a call out to the force that she is to be trailed and not apprehended.
Yeah, Tina's on the streets, and again, with all the people milling around, she's able to slink away unseen by anyone. Tina strolls rather dazedly through the city. And while she's walking, there's a bat following her.
And the police are following her as well, and they follow her to the chemical processing plant at 6th and Church.
Tina walks easily into the facility, down some stairs, and then down some more stairs. She seems like she's starting to come to and looks a little startled to find herself there.
And Mamuwalde is there waiting for her, and they kiss.
However, at this point, all the cops descend on the place, and Mamuwalde and Tina run so they can hide.
The cops are entering the facility, and they split up to cover more ground.
Also, there are Peters, Michelle, and Gordon. I don't know why Michelle's there. She's just in danger now.
One cop catches up on Mamuwalde and Tina and opens fire, and unfortunately, Tina is hit and goes down.
As she dies, she begs for help. But first, Mamuwalde has to take care of this cop.
The cop runs up to a obviously still conscious Mamuwalde, and after a brief struggle, Mamuwalde kills him. Then he turns back to Tina. The cop decides his present pose won't make a very appealing chalk outline, so he changes position.
It's really funny. I didn't even notice it till you pointed it out. Now Mamuwalde is going to save Tina by making her into a vampire. He bites her because it's the only way to save her. He bites her neck, her eyes flutter, and then she dies. Or does she?
An angry Mamuwalde yells out to Dr. Thalmus and all of them that they are dead, and they will meet his vengeance. And this chemical processing plant will become their tomb. Their tomb. Their tomb.
This makes everyone hesitate a bit, except for one cop who's not content to wait for Mamuwalde to kill him.
He somehow electrocutes himself.
He backs himself into an electrical panel and gets zapped. And now everyone's running. Mamuwalde ascends a ladder and starts picking off the cops one at a time. There's a railing kill. Blacula tosses the plant manager down some stairs and bowls over a couple of other cops, and he's throwing full barrels at them from a platform up above.
One of the cops finds a coffin and directs Gordon, Peters, and Michelle to it. Gordon tells Michelle to stay back, and while Gordon opens the coffin, Peters plunges a stake into the occupant's chest.
However, they didn't pause to see who the occupant might be, and if you know anything about movies, you know that it's Tina in there and not Mamuwalde. So Tina has now been staked right in front of her sister, who's screaming.
Tina sits up and screams, and Michelle screams at the sight of her sister with a stake in her chest. And Michelle starts to run toward her, but Gordon holds her back.
After a bit more screaming, Tina dies for real this time. And Michelle is so upset. She has to be restrained. And Peters and Gordon have to confront the horror of what they've just done.
Mamuwalde comes out of hiding and tells them to move away from her.
He looks down at Tina, who looks human again, and he has a moment with her. He calls himself a cursed creature whose only reason for living has been taken away. He kisses her hand and then says something to her in Abani. Then he turns at Peter and Gordon and says there's no need for them to draw their weapons.
He walks up into the sunlight. It's a vampiric suicide, but he does cover himself with his cape.
Nevertheless, it kills him. Peter and Gordon come up and uncover him, in time to see the changes that sunlight made to his body. First, the flesh falls off the bone, then his skull gets all maggoty, and then he's naught but bones. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we are talking about Blacula from 1972. William H. Marshall has the distinction of portraying the first black vampire to appear in film. Now, while Samuel Arkoff has written in his autobiography that the script came to him basically perfect, we also find out that William Marshall had input into the script, just to make sure that his character had more dignity. They changed the name of the character from Andrew Brown to Mamuwalde. He got a background story about being an African prince turned into a vampire in 1780. Director William Crain said that the pitch for the film that he was initially approached with featured the working title Count Brown's in Town. And as Crain put it, it was full of shuckin' and jiving, which he understood to be entirely at odds with his own sensibilities as a director, and also with Marshall's presence as both a human and an actor. Arkoff does admit that they made some minor changes to the script to adapt it to the actors and the locations that we selected. Nevertheless, he liked the script as it came to him.
Blacula was director William Crain's feature directorial debut. He began his career directing the television series Mod Squad, and he became one of the first black filmmakers from a major film school, UCLA, to achieve commercial success. Since filming, Crain has mentioned in interviews that when American International Pictures approached him, the rumor was that they were in the red, and so they were going to do a black vampire.
This is also the film debut of television actress Denise Nicholas, who played Michelle. Another thing distinctive about Blacula is that, unlike most horror films, it features a funk soundtrack, as opposed to haunting classical music. In addition to the Hughes Corporation, who are best known for their single Rock the Boat, the film's soundtrack features a score by Gene Page and contributions by 21st Century Limited.
Blacula was in production between late January and late March 1972. It was shot on location in Los Angeles, with some scenes shot in Watts and the final scenes taken at the Hyperion Outfall Treatment Plant in Playa del Rey.
What is it about movies who are always shooting in like water treatment plants and chemical plants that somehow makes a great backdrop for an action film?
Blacula opened in Washington, Dallas, Seattle, and Oklahoma City on August 25, 1972, and in Chicago 2 days later. Prior to its release, AIP's marketing department wanted to ensure that black audiences would be interested in Blacula, so some of the posters for the film included references to slavery.
Well, as did the movie, so that's fair. AIP held promotional showings in 2 New York theaters where anyone wearing a flowing cape could receive free admission. Would that be worth it? I don't know. So the movie was made on a budget of $500,000. That's estimated. It's typical budget for AIP at the time. And the film made $1,980,000 after opening, which made it one of the highest grossing films of 1972. When the film debuted, it made number 24 on Variety's list of top films.
Blacula received mixed reviews on its initial release. Variety gave the film a positive review, praising the screenplay, music, and acting by William Marshall. The Chicago Reader praised the film, writing that it would leave its audience more satisfied than any other post-Lugosi efforts. And Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune awarded 3 stars on a 4, calling it well-made and quite frightening.
I'd call that a thumbs up, but it got a thumbs down from Roger Greenspun in the New York Times, who said that anyone who goes to a vampire movie expecting sense is in serious trouble, and Blacula offers even less sense than most. And the Monthly Film Bulletin described the film as a disappointing model for what promised to be an exciting new genre, the black horror film. Little did he know that it was probably the best of all the black horror films. He said, apart from the introductory scene, the film conspicuously fails to pick up on any of the theme's more interesting possibilities, cinematic or philosophical.
Nevertheless, the film was awarded the Best Horror Film title at the first ever Saturn Awards.
That's pretty awesome. In an LA Times article dated September 9th, 1972, it said that star William Marshall, who's a classically trained Shakespearean actor renowned for his portrayal of Othello, had received some critical press notices for starring in a black exploitation film. When, according to the article, Beverly Hills Hollywood branch NAACP president Julius Griffin supported Mexican-American actor Anthony Quinn's proposed portrayal of black Haitian hero King Christophe and called Marshall's portrayal of Blacula demeaning, his constituency forced him to resign. So they were really behind him. Despite all these negatives, Blacula, which was the first black vampire movie, quickly gained popularity and became, as we said, a box office success. In 1972, William Marshall was also recognized. He received an award for his performance in Blacula by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films, originally known as the Count Dracula Society.
The box office success of Blacula sparked a wave of other black-themed horror films. A sequel to the film titled Scream, Blacula Scream was released in 1973 by AIP. That film also stars William Marshall in the title role, along with actress Pam Grier.
While we were watching the commentary for this movie, we heard documentarian David F. Walker say that at one point there was talk of a Blacula versus Blackenstein movie, but that idea never went anywhere. Back in 2021, it was announced that a reboot of Blacula was in development. The film was to be a co-production between MGM, Bronze Studios, and the Hidden Empire Film Group, with Roxanne Avent producing and Dion Taylor and Michael Ranum co-writing. Taylor planned to direct the film, but as of today, there's been no movement on the project.
2022 was the 50th anniversary of Blacula, and many cinemas hosted showings to celebrate the film, mostly in the UK.
Yeah, I noticed that was very strange. There weren't as many in the United States. I'm sorry we missed the anniversary of this. Obviously, a movie like Blacula is rife for spoofing. There was a porn made of it called Lust of Blacula in 1987. And on Saturday Night Live, guest host Sinbad portrayed Bram Stoker's Blacula.
The Simpsons featured a clip from a film called Blacula Meets Black Dracula. And in The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, one of the characters is seen with a box of Count Blacula cereal.
That's probably pretty good. And according to the article Celebrating 50 Years of Blacula by Leah Anderson in Fangoria, July of 2022, She says that the film indisputably opened the door and paved the way for every Black horror and several Black-led horror projects that have followed in the 50 years since its release. Influence seen in projects like Death by Temptation, Candyman, Vampire in Brooklyn, Blade, and Bones, just to name a few.
There are a few performers in Blacula appearing in other productions by AIP. William Marshall would, of course, reprise the character of Blacula in Scream, Blacula, Scream, and also portray a bishop in Abbey in 1974.
Thalmus Rasulala was in Cornbread, Earl and Me, Bucktown, and Friday Foster, which all came out in 1975.
Our Count Dracula, Charles Macaulay, would soon appear in The Dirt Gang later that year, 1972.
Lance Taylor Sr. starred in Frogs, also 1972.
And character actor Elisha Cook Jr., who played Sam the morgue attendant, had previously appeared in The Haunted Palace back in 1963.
Well, Jeff, this is the time in this podcast where we give our own opinion on the movie. And we do that using our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic. And I'd like to know what you think of Blacula.
Blacula was released fairly early in the blaxploitation era. Now, the term blaxploitation may need a little clarification. It's obviously not a word that would be coined in this day and age, but in the early 70s, I guess it was deemed okay. But what does it mean? It's obviously an exploitation movie that's exploiting something. Is it the Black community? Is it the Black actors involved? It's probably a little of this, because any movie with a commercial agenda is exploiting something. The only ones that were pointed out as exploitation movies were the ones that did this with extreme subject matter, being explicit violence or sex or something along those lines. Blacula, along with The Thing with Two Heads and Slaughter, were all released around the same time in July, August of 1972. But we're not talking about those other films, we're talking about Blacula. Now, something that caught my eye that I found interesting about this movie is that we meet Dracula in 1790, and this is about 100 years before we've ever seen Dracula before. In Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, we see him as Vlad Tepes, which wasn't in the novel, but that was his interpretation, bringing the actual character of Dracula into the vampiric lore. Other than that, we really haven't seen Dracula prior to the events in the novel in the late 1800s. So this is late 1700s when Mamuwalde and Luva enter Dracula's castle. And he doesn't seem all that different from the Dracula we knew, except for his hairstyle, which is different in every Dracula movie ever made. But I just want to note that it's a time period that we really haven't seen Dracula before, as far as I'm aware. Now, Blacula is a fairly low-budget film, and it definitely shows in places. As we talked about the sound recording within the castle, the echo, it makes it difficult to actually understand what's being said. And there's a shot of the vase being thrown over Mamuwalde's head that knocks him out. And the shot where the dead cop decides he would be more comfortable in this other position. So it's times where it's obvious that there was only one take and it could have benefited from a slightly bigger budget and allow maybe for a second take, or at least more coverage so that these kind of mistakes could have been avoided. Now, this is director William Crain's feature debut and only a second credit as a director. He had previously done just one episode of Mod Squad. And his IMDb page lists only 10 credits total as a director. And that lack of experience, I think, also shows within the film. A lot of the shots are very static. It plays, I'm going to mention Columbo in every single episode, I swear, but it looks kind of like a Columbo episode the way it's shot. It's very steady. It's a lot of close-ups. It's not very interestingly filmed. And the writers took advantage that the audience would have a lot of background on vampires, and maybe they didn't have a lot of that knowledge themselves. I'm thinking of the sequence when Mamuwalde is first released from the coffin and Bobby and Billy are attacked. Mamuwalde gets out and he's obviously very hungry. He hasn't eaten in 200 years. So he's probably just running on instinct at this time. There's blood in the air because Billy has slashed his arm. So after he feeds, he finds the cape, puts it on because vampires have to wear a cape. And then he laughs as he sits back in his coffin and lays down. And to hear a vampire laugh, you kind of expect that, but I can't think of any actual vampires laughing besides the Count on Sesame Street. Yeah, exactly. I can't think of Bela Lugosi actually laughing. You kind of picture it, but I can't think of any examples where actually happened. And I'm pretty sure Christopher Lee just snarled and hissed. So I don't think there's ever been an amused Dracula. And obviously there's other vampires, but I guess David and the Lost Boys laughed. But it's not very common. But it's still, because of the Count, I think, it's something you expect a vampire to do. So you just go with it when you see that scene. Yeah, Mamuwalde just killed two guys. and he's overjoyed. He's probably just happy to be full after not eating in 200 years. But he laughs, he lays down, and we just go with it because that's regular vampire behavior. But if you take a minute to think about it, it's a little corny. And as we get to know Mamuwalde, it actually seems a little out of character for him to just laugh like that as he lays back down. And there's another instant when Mamuwalde kills the cop in the alley. He doesn't have to do that. He got away. He could have turned into a bat and just flown out of there, and he would have disappeared. But he comes out and displays his vampireness and kills the cop, and that didn't really need to happen. And again, is that out of character for Mamuwalde? I mean, he is a vampire. He is being pursued, and I don't know, it's complicated because his only reason for living is to get back with his love. Would he kill just because he can if he didn't have to? Apparently he will, but is that out of character for Mamuwalde to do this? And of course there are plot holes. How did Mamuwalde become acclimated to 1972 era Los Angeles so quickly? He knows about cameras, as you mentioned. He doesn't know about taxicabs. He doesn't seem to know about purses. He picks up the purse that Tina dropped and doesn't seem to really know what it is. He just knows that it's hers, and he appreciates the value it has as belonging to her. But he gets around town without a problem. I mean, I guess he can fly around and get a bat's eye view, which might help. And there's this theory in film, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's based on the idea that seeing is believing. If you're an audience, what you see, you just go with it because you're in the moment. And for example, if you see Kermit the Frog on screen, I'm talking about Muppets a lot in this episode. You see Kermit the Frog on screen. He doesn't really look like a frog, but he says he's a frog and he's green, so you go with it. And that's like the most basic definition of what this theory states. But there's a lot of that going on in Blacula. And I think those events that seem out of character for Mamuwalde are examples of that, where you just go with it because it's obviously happening. So those are some of my issues with the movie, but this movie is a lot of fun. And if I had just watched it, I wouldn't have even picked up on a lot of those because I would have been just going with it. But having looked at it very closely and dissecting it, I did notice some of those weird things that wouldn't have presented themselves to me in a casual viewing. But nonetheless, this movie is a lot of fun, and I think it's an A for awesome. What do you think, Cheryl?
Our movies are chosen for us in some cases by a random movie selector that picks an AIP movie out of their catalog, and then we're forced to watch it and talk about it. Sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't. And then every once in a while we allow ourselves a choice. And Blacula was my choice. I chose Blacula for two reasons. Earlier this year, I saw the movie presented by Sven Gulli on MeTV, and I really enjoyed it. Knowing that this episode would be released just before Halloween, I thought this would be the perfect movie for us to do. The first time I watched it, I fell in love with it. It wasn't what I expected. What I expected was a cheesy vampire film that just happened to star a cast of black actors. But instead, it introduced us to one of the most sympathetic and dignified cinematic vampires ever to don the cape. The character of Mamuwalde transcends his Blacula moniker, which was given to him by his sire and slaver. And though he does terrible things, unforgivable things even, we still sympathize with him. I think that's due to the duality of his character. In this movie, Mamuwalde is both the hero and the villain. Yes, he kills cops, and he kills other people too, but I think given the political and social struggles of the day, killing cops, especially white ones, was sort of a stand-in for killing enslavers. And those struggles are still with us today in 2023. It's 51 years, and we still see the struggle of the black community versus the police, aka enslavers, perhaps, thematically anyways. And I think the movie is part of the reason we do root for him despite all the killing. His backstory as an African prince trying to stop the slave trade makes it impossible to root against him, I think. And second, his overriding raison d'etre in the film is to reunite with his lost love, whom he believes he has found again in Tina. And though it seems she is not entirely a free agent in this affair, she does seem to be under his spell throughout the film. His love for her appears to be genuine, and their affair has no violence or overt coercion. I can readily believe that Marshall, a stage actor trained in Broadway, Grand Opera, and Shakespeare, had a large influence on his role. Anything less dignified would have been beneath him. The acting from Marshall, McGee, Nicholas, and Rasulala, it elevates this film from campy to classy, in my opinion. And of course there are problems. The script treats its two gay characters dismissively, even insultingly. There are huge holes in the plot that are obvious when you watch it as closely as we had to. The sets are super cheap, and that's in keeping with the typical AIP budget. The camera work is amateurish, and there are a number of gaffes that they make us laugh, but they keep the film from being what you could call great cinema. While you were talking about when the movie was set, that never occurred to me until you said it, but now I'm thinking that they had to put it in 1790 because had they placed it in the late 1800s, the slave trade had mostly ended by that point. So I believe that's the reason that they moved Dracula to an earlier time than was present in most Dracula movies and the Bram Stoker novel. But despite all its problems, I feel that a good film makes you feel good by watching it, and Blacula does that handily. There's dynamic acting, a kick-ass soundtrack with in-movie performances by the Hughes Corporation, and a plot that adds a new twist to the vampire genre. Not to mention being a groundbreaker by having a black actor play Dracula for the very first time. So I have to say, what's not to love about it? Of course I give it an A. A for awesome. A+ even. I love this movie.
One thing that we did neglect to mention is, although Mamuwalde has become a monster of sort, he's also a very tragic figure. His wife Luva was killed by a Caucasian Dracula, and then Tina was murdered by a Caucasian cop, and then staked by Peters, the Caucasian detective. And I'm sure that was a conscious choice to have Peters do the staking in this and not have Gordon do it.
Oh, definitely.
And then Mamuwalde just gives up. He decides he can't win, and he goes up into the sunlight.
Yeah, you would have expected him to unleash a bloodbath at this point. But he's done. He can't do it anymore. He wasn't killing to kill. He was killing to be with his wife.
Even if it wasn't always necessary.
One thing about the setting, I did uncover a little bit of information in my research for this movie. And what I read was, although the title card in the movie's prologue lists the year at 1780, Film Facts and several reviews describe the film's initial segment as being set in 1815. This is possibly due to the fact that publicity material for Blacula, found in the AMPAS library production file on the film, listed 1815 as the year the movie began.
That's still a time period we haven't seen Dracula.
True. It is the right century, at least. I suppose it's time to close the coffin on this episode of the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.